Hello, hello. I'm Kier,
And I'm Liam.
and this is Hot Take Think Tank. Liam, I need to see what you think of this headline. All right.
Okay.
Okay. UBC student commutes from Calgary, cheaper than paying Vancouver rent.
That is wild. Yeah. Wild, but also kind of believable because Calgary is like so much cheaper to live in than Vancouver.
Yeah, it's
and it's not
amazing.
that long a flight. And and it's like not that easy to commute from the suburbs of Vancouver to UBC anyway. So,
Yeah.
huh.
Honestly, it might take the same distance for me to bus to UBC from the suburbs of Vancouver
Right, yeah,
than
if
for him.
someone like if you had to race someone and they are living near the airport in Calgary,
They might
uh
beat me.
might be
Isn't that amazing? So,
wild.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically there's like super cheap flights. They're $150, I think, a pop. And
Uh-huh.
so he all his classes are in 2 days of the week. So he basically
Okay.
calculated it and he'll pay about 1,200 a month to commute. Whereas he would like the average
Hmm.
price of a one bedroom in Vancouver is 2,100. So he's going to save like about $900 a month by doing this.
Wild. Yeah, that's a wild story.
Yeah, I'm like
Huh.
impressed by the ingenuity and not impressed by how much jet fuel that would take. But like, I
Yeah,
kind of,
totally. There's
I
like
hope
some
there's like enough stories like this, right? We've got like students living under
yeah.
bridges. Now we've got students commuting by
So
plane. Like
it makes me think of
maybe,
like the kind of person who hears about like an all-you-can-eat buffet that lasts all day, right? And they're like, "Well, for $12, as long as I go there for 3 meals, right? I'll save so much money."
oh my gosh, that happened when I was working at a restaurant downtown. We had like a
Hmm.
Mother's Day buffet.
Hmm.
And this one guy just came in and it was like, I don't know, $35 or something like that. He
Right.
came in and all he ate was crab legs.
That's how you do it.
That's how
Yeah.
you do it.
There's some things you can eat that you'll get less than your money's worth, and other things you can eat that you get more than your money's worth.
Exactly. Forget about those muffins. Don't
Yeah,
touch them.
forget
Go for
about
the crab
anything that's
legs.
like up front. They put the salad bar up front. That's how they get you.
Right. Yeah.
Go to
Go
the
for the
back
back.
to the part
So
that doesn't get refilled as often. That's where you get your money's worth.
the thing is, I just don't feel like I would actually enjoy eating plate after plate of crab's legs. But our chef like actually went out and kicked him out.
I think
So
you'd only enjoy it if like you were really focused on how much money you were saving. Right? You
yeah,
have like a little note paper
exactly.
where you're writing like, okay, that's worth $10. That's worth $10. That's worth, all right,
Yeah.
I'm making money here.
Yeah, I don't care about like how it tastes, the palate fatigue, like I don't want
Yeah.
variety or like
No.
a satisfying meal. I just want to like make make my money back. It's so good.
Yeah. No, that's wild though. I wonder, that seems like, is it like some promotional price on the flights or something? That seems wildly cheap, or just like really cramped and no luggage sort of thing.
I mean, I think the airlines are just their pricing is so absurd. Like it doesn't actually correspond with like the cost.
Right.
It's like
Well,
this
but like they must
Byzantine thing.
somehow run a profitable business at the end of the day, or at least marginally so.
Well, it's very marginal, and yeah, they have lots of tricks to and various
Right.
strategies to try and get it back. But they do offer like these really, really popular routes. They will
Mhm.
totally do,
Right. Like sort of
yeah,
lost
less
leader
than.
thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm
Get you
sure
in the
they
door.
also have like business class probably on those planes that
Mm.
helps even it out. But
Right. Huh.
so yes,
Well, props to that kid.
yeah, exactly.
I know someone who works in the like environmental impact part of the UBC organization. I wonder what
Oof.
he's thinking reading that article. Like they're all focused on like getting solar panels and renewable energy and all that, promoting e-bikes as a way to commute to school. He's probably
Yeah.
not psyched to hear about someone flying to school and back every week.
Well, then the news reporting on it might give a couple more people an idea, but
Yeah.
oh well.
Huh.
So yes, the breaking news is that Vancouver remains unaffordable.
Right, but that's not that's not what we're supposed to be talking about. We're supposed to
No.
talk about last week's Kier here article. How to spot a
Yes.
crybully.
How to
Another good one.
spot a crybully. Yes, yes. It was fun to read. Read. That's silly. I wrote it. It was also fun
Right.
to read, but it was fun to write. But yeah, it was kind of nerve-wracking. Like, I feel like my heart was pounding a bit extra this week, because it's a bit of a controversial topic, I guess. Or like,
Sure.
if a crybaby reads it, they're going to be really mad at you. So
Right. And they're maybe the kind of person who like knows how to mobilize a movement against you.
that's what they do.
That's the idea. But nothing like that yet that I've heard of. I didn't see any. I don't know. You seem to be okay. No pitchforks in the background or anything.
Yeah. The mob has not yet arrived. Maybe they're still organizing themselves. Yeah, but I think you expressed some curiosity.
Right up top, you say, since a local organization is currently under attack from false allegations of a social justice nature, and then you do not expand on that. You just move right along to the next point. So we'll get to your other points, but can you tell us about what's going on locally? Something's happening that made you write this article?
Yes, I can. I feel like I was like unsure about whether to get into it or not in the article because it's sort of like, oh, is it good to draw more attention to it, or is it like more beneficial to just not do that?
Well,
but
I feel like you usually write about bigger ideas and you don't want to get bogged down on the details so much about like a specific instance of something you're trying to write broadly about.
Exactly.
But
and
that's what the podcast is for, maybe.
There we go. Yeah. And I just never would want to like instigate any type of mobbing, right? So I don't want to like target a particular person, which is part of why I try and usually write one level up from that. But this was the Vancouver Dyke March basically posted on Instagram about false allegations that had been recently made against them. And I do have some friends that are involved. And so I kind of, it was shared with me who the person making the allegations is. I'm not going to name that person because I don't want it all to send people in their direction. But it is actually someone who has fabricated things that I have said in the past.
Oh, interesting. So not personally credible to you so much then.
No. And like, I think this person, like over the years, more and more people are realizing that like once they decide they don't like someone, that they just do everything possible to ruin them. So it's happened enough times that I'm not at all like conflicted about what's happened here. I do 100% believe the Vancouver Dyke March that the allegations are false. And the allegations are like, that they're turfy, that they took too long with the Palestine statement, which is funny because they're a nonprofit that puts on an event. I think it's in June every year. So they don't like meet in like October or November, right? Like,
right. Yeah. Well, and like it's weird the sort of demand for every organization to issue statements on all of these sort of issues. Like, I saw like a headline that was like that Kraft has like an advertisement for the Super Bowl that's like about anti-Semitism. Which seems weird for Kraft, the like cheese company. I don't know. It's sort of it seems a little absurd, the idea that people and organizations can get in trouble for not talking like because there's just so much that happens in the world. It's like how many things do you have to denounce every day? And like if you denounce some but not others, are you like implicitly endorsing the others? It seems like an unwinnable game.
You can literally give yourself OCD by trying to like say all the right things all the time. Yeah. Trust me, I've tried.
Scrupulosity. Have you heard that term before? It's like a specific kind of OCD that's about like being morally righteous. Usually in the context like of religious OCD, where it's like worrying that God's going to see your thoughts and you're going to think the wrong thoughts and you are very obsessive about it. But some of the things you write about make me think of scrupulosity, where it's like, this like you could get into such a panicked mood about like making sure that you are denouncing absolutely everything you need to denounce.
Oh my gosh. Okay. This is the perfect segue because I got on my Instagram in the stories, I asked people to share their Crybully experiences. And I have like several that I want to share. But I'll start with one where it's like, you are literally giving this person scrupulosity. So this person lived in a collective queer house. And basically one roommate said they overheard another roommate saying the N-word while singing along to a Drake song while she thought she was home alone.
Huh.
So from there, a bunch of other roommates said, yeah, I also heard that. Wow. Even though they did not. Like the person leaving the comments, like, that was a lie. I did not hear that person say it. But basically everyone like jumped on the bandwagon that this person saying the N-word, well, thinking they were home alone, and they literally got evicted over that.
Oh my gosh.
So
wow.
That's like the type of hypervigilance that's expected of you. That you like you have to be careful what you say when you're literally alone.
Right, yeah, and like that total divorce of like the word from the context, where it's like not like the problem with saying that word is like the implicit racism, I guess, in it, but and particularly the explicit racism that a lot of people use that word with. But like singing, that reminds me, I went to a Kanye West concert. I might be able to get canceled just for that, I guess. It was before a lot of the stuff happened. But it was in Vancouver. A lot of white people in Vancouver. Rogers Arena, pretty full with, people of all sorts, but lots of white people. And he did this thing where he would cut the music and expect the crowd to sing loud enough and enthusiastic enough to like amp him up to keep going with the next verse. And if we didn't sing enough, he would restart the song and do it again. And you could just feel like, because the N-word was involved, and you could just feel the crowd like pulling back at that word, like, we know you want us to, but we don't know if we're supposed to, or like if we it was weird. It was a weird experience.
Do you remember what year was that?
Oh, what year would that have been? It was the year the Life of Pablo came out. Life of Pablo must have been 2018 or so. 2016.
2016. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A different era.
Yeah, I can't remember like kind of when that became like more of a taboo, specifically in the context of songs.
He was trying to be. I think that was part of what he was getting. I don't know.
Okay.
Like it was
intentionally provocative, maybe.
Yes. Yeah. That's perfect.
That makes sense with that guy. Not surprising.
No.
That's kind of like a cool troll move to be like, I am in a room of like majority white fans. How can I mess with them?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Fun
okay.
Show. Wow. You have more stories to share.
I do have more stories to share. Okay. Another reader got publicly called out as a sexual predator for flicking their best friend's nipple, and the best friend is a guy.
Okay, that's a weird one.
It's terrible. Can you imagine like that literally people in your city have been told that you are a sexual predator, and that is what it is based on?
Right, totally. Like that's not what people think of when they hear those words.
Exactly.
When you hear someone's sexual predator, you're not like, oh, that person probably flicked someone's nipple one time. Yeah, that could mess up trying to meet anyone if your reputation precedes you, and that's how your reputation is being framed. Huh.
Yes, it could. Hello, this is Editing Kier here, interrupting. I just wanted to let you know that we made a couple of edits to better maintain the anonymity of the writer of one of the comments that we discuss. But our editor, Laser, does such a good job. It's so smooth. I don't even think you're going to notice. Okay, back to the show. There was another one where someone got forced out of a restaurant job for being unsafe. And the unsafe thing was that they wore like hippie like festival clothes, and that they had
The hairline.
and they actually totally changed their hair and changed their clothes, but it wasn't enough. They still had to be fired.
Huh. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Editing here is back. Just wanted to clarify that this person did not get fired from the restaurant, but their schedule was changed, and then they were moved from front of house to back of house, and they decided to quit after that. Okay, but here is the one that like outraged the most people. I got so many messages just being like, what? Okay. I'm going to read this one verbatim. So this is a quote. When I was an undergrad, a male student asked me out. I said, no, sorry, I'm a lesbian. I'm 100% homosexual, despite trying to force myself to be bi back in high school. Time went on, thought nothing of it. The next year, he came out as a trans demigirl, still not entirely sure what that means, and put me on blast on Facebook for the rejection, saying that lesbians love all women and homosexual lesbians are genital fetishists and that we need to unlearn our trauma. Somehow, I was supposed to know that this male person did not truly identify as male, even when they did publicly identify as male at the time, and my rejection was deeply invalidating.
Wow, that's something else. That really feels like a story from a whole other world to me. I don't. What's you're using the term homosexual lesbian?
Yeah.
Those are the genital fetishist lesbians who.
Apparently, yes. Yes.
And demigirl is also a new one to me. I mean, I know like a demi means like half, like Hercules is a demigod.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose a demigirl is like a specific non-binary option.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to guess, I don't know what this person means by it, but if I had to guess, that might be like a trans person who's not going to like medically transition.
Okay.
I don't know, but that's what I would guess hearing a trans demigirl, right? It's like, I'm kind of a girl. Maybe I can like skip the surgeries or something. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Well, and maybe I can like, rewrite history a little bit and feel better about this awkward interaction I had.
It's so like, oh my gosh. First of all, you would need to be literally clairvoyant to avoid this one. Yeah, I don't know. It's like all of us have, or many of us anyways, have been like spurned. Someone that we liked didn't like us back. And you can have, like, I've had the craziest like inner monologues about it, right? Where I'm just like, oh, like this is why that happened, or this is what's wrong with that person. And if they like, why would anyone ever not want to date me? That's cruelty or whatever, right? But it's like, it's okay to have those thoughts. It's okay to like yell them into your pillow or write them in a diary. But to like publicly call someone out who didn't want to date you, especially with all the context of this, is just like, it's so unhinged.
It totally is. Well, and it's like you fall into like contradictory territory so quickly, because it's like, is that not like a really uncomfortable and coercive thing to do, right? When someone rejects you, no means no, right? You're not supposed to it's so weird. Well, and I feel like it does get at a bit like the thing I found so interesting about your article, or about like the idea of crybullies. It's this idea that it's like an unintended consequence of the like movement to try and like believe victims, right? And it's like, I think that is a movement that's very justified and good. I don't think that the previous baseline of like, well, only if someone's convicted of a crime should we punish the perpetrator, right? I think that was like a line too far in that direction. And so it's like, let's redefine these social interactions and say like, by default we should believe victims, which I think is probably good, but it has a side effect of anyone can tap into that new like social capital that exists, right? It enables this thing where it's like, if you say that you are the victim of racism because your roommate said the N-word while singing along to a song in the other room, then like you can tap into this like power source that was previously like unattainable, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like this the crybully phenomenon feels like a a side effect of something that was good. But it's like, if we don't talk about the negative aspects of a change, then there's like no plan to mitigate those negative aspects, right? And I feel like that's
Yes.
that's what I love so much about the article, right? It's like how to spot a crybully. It's like, you're not arguing like that we should believe victims less. You're saying like, here's a problem with that whole way of thinking. Let's just address that problem, right? Like, let's keep our eye out for this sort of thing, so that we can keep believing real victims. And keep an eye out to not let the system be abused by other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I think that's the thing. A lot of times, if you're writing about like a particular, say, like loophole or, an unintended consequence of a certain change that's been made, people think that you like are throwing out the whole change, right? That you don't support, like I don't support like believing survivors or whatever. But that's silly. Come on. Like we can be a little smarter than that and realize that like it's possible to be like, like maybe that's a good default overall in general. Maybe that's, the way to go, but that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be weird side effects or like unusual use cases or whatever that like are worth talking about, because people also wrote me in saying like, I lost my job, I lost all my friends, I almost lost my life. Like people like these false allegations can like literally like ruin people's lives like and end their careers. And it's absurd to me to think like, oh, like we need to do so much to protect this progress, like to the point that we have to pretend that this isn't happening and like tell people it's not happening to them when it is happening to them.
Well, it's like it feels like a very like a perspective you'd take if you felt like your position was weak, like that the idea of believing victims is like a fragile thing that needs to be protected from any criticism. Whereas I feel like it makes it stronger and like more sustainable to let criticism come to your worldview and to like incorporate it and to improve the way you think of things and the way that you act based on that criticism, right? It's like not all criticism is going to be valid. And if it was like, this is so common, we need to go back to the old ways of, relying entirely on criminal justice system, that would be absurd. but you can make it's like you can use criticism to help adjust so that you are less liable to be criticized, right? It's like that's the point of constructive criticism, right? That's the term. It's like not criticizing to bring something down, it's criticizing to improve something, right? Like this is a great movement, it's made society better, let's make it even better again by addressing the problems with the new way of thinking.
Exactly. Well, and for me too, like I feel like a shift, since when I was more of an anarchist is like, I actually like do think there are some really cool things about our legal system, like innocent till proven guilty. I'm a fan of that actually. There are like situations in which it has really failed us, and there's a lot of like reform that has happened that's been great, and there's more reform to do. But yeah, the idea that like mobs are more just than a court, right? That like pitchforks are the like more just weapon. Well, like I don't know.
I feel like it's an idea that like the criminal justice system, the problems in it are there because the people who designed it are evil, or the people who control it are have bad plans for the world, right? That it's just there to enslave people, that sort of thing. It's like as opposed to thinking maybe some of the problems come from an actual compromise that needed to be made, right? Like there needed to be a solution to this very complicated problem of false allegations, right? And like that's not an easy problem to grapple with, and that there isn't a simple solution to it. And so it's like not, like the burden of evidence or whatever falling on the prosecution isn't just like some idea they did to like try and keep victims down, right? Like maybe it was put in place
Oh,
for a reason.
yeah, yeah.
And like maybe like an overly simplistic replacement like believe victims does leave a lot to be desired.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've like just sloganeering in general. I'm so tired of it because, yeah, like believe victims, like, what does that mean? Like, it basically encourages people to like take a mental shortcut, basically. When you're in a
Right.
situation, who's right and who's wrong?
Mm.
Well, we know the victim is right, but this is exactly what crybullies exploit. Because, and I
Right.
got an email that this
Mm.
person was saying how they've dealt with crybullies, and they basically said it's really important for you to say, I'm being bullied first. Whoever says it first, like, can be like taken more seriously in a lot of, and
Right.
that's crazy. That's bad, right? But um yeah, like it crybullies know that we believe victims. So if
Yeah.
you want to get out of a situation or you want to be the good one,
Mm.
that might be a good way to do it.
Right, to tap into the same weird current of social power that is now flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I do feel like I need to. It's like I do think believing victims is probably a better policy than believing accused perpetrators. If you had to pick one, right? Like I think, particularly for just like the general audience who isn't making legal decisions about what happens to people,
Right.
I think it's probably for the best. But also, it's like don't like act on it unless it's a bit more evidenced. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe don't act on it at all. Depends on what's happening.
Yeah, a slogan should not like flatten the particularities of a one
Totally.
situation, right? We need to
Yeah.
look at them individually with keeping in mind that, abuses can be charming and, various kind of things
Totally.
that in the past have worked against the reputations of survivors. Like, let's keep those in mind. And
Mhm.
then let's look at what actually happened in this particular situation.
Totally. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
a Bayesian thing, which is like the math probability stuff, where it's like probably, I don't know, 95% of people who claim to be abused are actually abused, and then further information you gather in either direction can move your odds for that particular case in one
Right.
direction or the other, right? Like knowing that this person has made false accusations a lot in the past probably bumps it way down real quick, right? Whereas like
Yeah,
a
totally.
charming abuser probably doesn't move the line very much at all, right? It's
Yeah, exactly.
you gotta, yeah.
It was actually really funny. Yeah, that person I mentioned at the beginning who has accused the Dyke March of this stuff, like basically they like were talking to my ex and said that I had said things that I never said and that like I was upset in ways that I am not and never said I was. And so anyways, the short version is that like I got this angry message from my ex being like, how could you say this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I was
Right.
like, you need to slow down because I have no idea what you're talking about. And
Right.
basically, like, it became super clear because it's like my ex and I have known each other for years
Mm.
and we don't lie to each other. We're both like, we know that we are both
Yeah.
honest people. So it was like clear as day that the variable was this new person, right?
Yeah.
Like, it
Totally.
was so clear. And I think that's kind of why I wanted to write the essay is, and I did say like usually you can't tell from a particular situation, like one event, if someone is
Right.
a crybully, it's a pattern,
Totally.
right? But if there is someone who's like consistently trying to destroy
Uh-huh.
everything good in your city, maybe this is what's going on.
Yeah, seems possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, there is we're gonna move on to other articles, and I do feel like there's a tie-in, a pretty clear tie-in, sort of with like, your article was about unintended consequence. It's like you want to help improve the lives uh, of victims, right, of people who have been abused or oppressed people or that sort of thing, and so you like try and change society so that you listen more to victims, and the unintended consequence of that is that people who aren't victims can claim that victimhood, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, I think it's a very admirable goal to make the lives of transgender children better.
Yeah.
Um, and part of that is to like increase their access to important medical care.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, do you risk giving inappropriate medical care to some children if you expand access to children of all these sort of drugs and other
Yeah.
things? And that's, I think, what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, totally. The article we're going to discuss was in the New York Times, and it's the title is "As Kids They Thought They Were Trans, They No Longer Do," and the author is Pamela Paul. And I just have to say off the bat, like, I am so relieved that this article was written, because this is sort of a topic, honestly, that is so hot and so touchy for good reason, that I have like been hesitant to talk about it.
Right.
But I feel ready, and an article like this helps me feel ready because, well, for a number of different reasons that we're going to get into. But I guess I wanted to sort of give my stance off the top in case anyone wants to know that.
You got a written statement, or?
I did honestly take some notes. Yeah.
Cool,
yeah, because there's some stuff I didn't want to miss. But yeah, I mean, the short version is I support adult transition, and I believe that gender dysphoria treatments should be available and funded by our public health system. We're in Canada. We have one of those. I also support youth transition if there is thorough screening, treatment, and support for mental illness, neurodivergence, and trauma. And if there is a period of watchful waiting to see if the dysphoria persists over time. The other thing I would say, like, I think the most beneficial therapist for a gender dysphoric child or teenager to see would be one who is neutral to the outcome, right? They don't consider transitioning to be like a failure or a disaster, but they also are aware that symptoms presenting as gender dysphoria can be caused by other types of distress, which includes internalized homophobia. So I think there are just trade-offs, right? There are trade-offs to puberty blockers. There's trade-offs to hormone replacement therapy. There are trade-offs to surgery. And I think like questions around, first of all, informed consent. Does someone have all the information to make the decision? And secondly, like, are they cognitively mature enough to make decisions that are permanent and irreversible? Like, those I think are like really worthwhile questions to talk about, and they're not settled.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because I knew we were going to be talking about this, and I think we feel similarly that like it's a bit of it feels very hot button and like a bit uncomfortable to talk about. And I was trying to think of why. And I think what it comes down to for me is that I feel like there's this, like, that things that are seen as innate, there's like an agreement that we shouldn't discriminate based on those things. Whereas things that are choices, I think, are there's less agreement, shall we say, about whether or not you should discriminate on people's choices. And just in the headline of this, as kids they thought they were trans, they no longer do, sort of gets at that dichotomy, and I feel like uncomfortably puts it in some ways into the choice category in a way that feels a little scary, right? Because it's like I don't think that there should be any discrimination against, non-binary or transgender folks, but I don't know, it's just scary to even admit that, like, sometimes a kid will come out as trans and then change their mind because like the model of I don't know, in my head it's like I don't know, it reminds me of like homosexuality, right? That it's like it's not a choice, it's something that some people are, some people everyone's on the spectrum somewhere, and that it's like not a choice, and therefore should never be discriminated against. Yeah, I don't know. So it feels uncomfortable. It's
for sure. and there are sort of like competing narratives, like even about what trans means, right? You have like,
Right.
Binary people that transition from female to male or male to female. And I would guess that those people are much more likely to want medical treatments. There's also lots of people who consider themselves non-binary or gender fluid or whatever. And some of those people want medical treatments, but many don't. And there's a real material difference in the group of people that like, like I know the thing is like if someone like gets a hysterectomy, like, and they're no longer producing hormones naturally, like they have to take hormones for the rest of their lives. Right. So, there's like a permanency to those decisions. And it is uncomfortable to talk about, because, well, for many reasons. But I think like one thing that's really awkward about it, like, is that basically people who detransition are like largely shunned by the left. And it's really sad. It's something that really bothers me. When I stopped being like so intensely into social justice land, one of the things I noticed was like just the absolute disgust that people have for people who detransition. And it's sort of like this like sad cycle where because the left is not willing to talk about detransition, the detransitioners who want to get their story out can only talk to the right-wing press. The left-wing press doesn't even touch it. So then people point at the detransitioners and say, look, they've got this right-wing agenda, like blah, blah, blah.
Right. Why are they on Fox News or whatever?
Exactly. And it's like they would happily they talk to anybody who wants to talk to them, but, we don't talk to them. So like, where are they supposed to go? And that's a real change in this article. Like there are a couple detransitioners that are interviewed along with a variety of specialists.
Right. And it's in the New York Times, not traditionally like a right-wing mouthpiece. Right. It's like I don't know, pretty down the middle lefty kind of paper, I think.
Yeah, definitely, particularly in recent years. So was there anything particular that you wanted to talk about in this article, or should we just sort of slowly make our way through it?
Well, I think we can just make our way through it. That sounds good.
Okay, cool. So the beginning of the article, the first detransitioner that we meet, her name is Grace Powell. And she really remembers kind of having a lot of distress as a teenager, feeling very alienated during puberty, and, kind of coming to believe that gender dysphoria was at the root of this distress. And this is a quote. The narrative that she had heard and absorbed was that if you don't transition, you'll kill yourself. And later in the article, there's a parent actually who, with her child in the room, was told by a professional, like, would you rather have an alive son or a dead daughter? Or maybe it was the other genders. The point being, like, it's crazy because there's a phenomenon known as suicide contagion, right? Like, I believe that is well established. And so there's a lot of care around how to talk about suicide and how not to talk about suicide. And the idea to like put a parent or a kid in the position of like, if you don't do this, you will literally die. Like, that is awful. And it also is not supported by the evidence that's currently available.
No, I mean, definitely not like as an all or nothing statement, right? It's even if it is shown to reduce suicide rates, it's not 100% on one side and 0% on the other, right? Like, well, and to just take a step back in the article, it is, I feel like, of note that most teenagers feel uncomfortable in their bodies at some point because puberty is like a weird transitional period for everybody. So there's something interesting, I think, about like taking a universal experience and like making it pathological or making it like an identifying feature. I don't know. I feel like you see
For sure.
like I like the videos. There was like a video I saw, and it was like a guy who had like metal sheets, and he'd shake them, and they go like wubba 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 in like this satisfying way. But like the comments were all about like everyone who likes this video is neurodivergent. And it's
Right.
like one of those things where it's like, well, actually, everyone thinks it sounds cool, but like
Yeah.
it could become like I don't know, like something that people build identity around. And I don't know, I could totally see that happening around, like having a trans identity.
For
And if you're
sure.
feeling uncomfortable with how your puberty is progressing, or feeling uncomfortable with sexism in society, or all sorts of things, I feel like could be, made into content that is like, if you check these 10 boxes, you might be trans.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Like, puberty is so distressing for so many people. And just that
Yeah.
time of life is like really conflict ridden for a lot of time. Like, I was miserable. Like, yeah, 14,
Yeah.
15, 16 was
Uh-huh.
awful. And that's like super common. And so, yeah, I think like one thing that the detransitioner Powell said that really stuck out to me was that at no point during the medical and surgical transition did anyone ask her about the reasons behind her gender dysphoria. And so
Right.
I'll quote here, but basically, yeah, at no point was she asked about her sexual orientation, and at no point was she asked about any previous trauma. So neither the therapist nor the doctors ever learned that she'd been sexually abused as a child. And so for me, I'm like, it blows my mind that like basically gender care seems to have been like compartmentalized.
Right. Yeah, this is totally what I have in my notes here. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And it's like, if you
Right.
go into a gender clinic,
Exactly.
that's their thing, right? And then they
That's what
refer
they
you
do.
to the endocrinologist, right, who does hormones. And
Hmm.
it's like, that seems to be the pipeline, that a lot of countries are developing.
Yeah.
Is like, we'll have these clinics and kids can go to them, and that at this clinic we treat things around gender identity. So,
Hmm.
we don't treat things around trauma or poverty or sadness or malaise or depression or autism or anything else, right? It's like, we're the gender clinic. You come to us, we help you with your gender stuff. And
Yeah,
it's like, but
exactly.
gender, I feel like, is part of such a complicated web of life, and like finding who you are. And yeah, it's a weird silo, and I feel like it is a silo, and sort of like just integrating it more fully with other parts of the medical system might help.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what, because I've been thinking like uh, I do know a handful of detransitioners in real life,
Mhm.
but in general, like a lot of the stories I hear of detransitioners who are really unhappy with the care they received, a lot of them are from the States, a lot of them are
Mhm.
from the United Kingdom, and I don't know if that's just a coincidence or
Right.
whatever, right? But I hadn't seen a lot from Canada. So that actually made me wonder. I was like, you know what? Maybe we're doing it
Hmm.
differently up here. Like maybe there's there is actual care, like mental health care is like incorporated in, or there's like more thorough
Right.
screening or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, this article has an example from where we live, British Columbia,
Right.
Canada.
Yeah. Hmm.
So this was super illuminating to me. Um, because yeah, I'm like, am I just imagining a problem here? Right? Like
Hmm.
maybe
Right.
we do screen kids super well. And so
Totally.
I have no reason to be concerned because it's already happening.
Yeah.
But
But no, we made it to the New York Times. Shout out.
yeah. Yeah, so there is this trans man and registered nurse who used to work at a clinic in British Columbia, um, in like a treating gender dysphoric youth. Um, and he transitioned after comprehensive screening when he was 33. It
Hmm.
resolved his dysphoria. He had a good outcome and is happy with his transition.
Yeah.
But When the gender affirming model, and let's talk about what exactly that means after this. When the gender affirming model was first introduced at his clinic, he was instructed to support the initiation of hormone treatment for incoming patients, regardless of whether they had complex mental health problems, experiences with trauma, or were otherwise severely unwell. That was a quote. And it says further, when he referred patients for further mental health care rather than immediate hormone treatment, he said he was accused of what they called gatekeeping and had to change jobs. This is a trans nurse. So gender affirming care, that is a particular model that is basically based on informed consent, right? It's like you come in, you tell us that you want access to this. We tell you the risks and benefits, and then you decide. And if you decide you want the treatment, we give it to you. And this is a response to a really rigorous assessment that there were in earlier decades where it was incredibly difficult to transition medically. And basically this is going to sound kind of crazy, but the doctor had to decide if you would be attractive after your surgeries and treatments. And if they didn't think that you could pass, they might just deny you based on that.
Right. Well, and the whole system, every step I assume would be set up to limit your right to be you got to check all these 100 boxes. And if you don't check a single one, you're out.
Yes.
And this system maybe is a response to that old style of not letting anyone get treatment, or very few people.
Exactly. Yeah. It also used to require you to live for a full year as the gender you want to transition to. And you can imagine that could be distressing, if you have not physically transitioned at all, but you have to dress as if you had. I totally think there were issues with that, but I think basically the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction at this point. I actually think that informed consent is a great model for adults. I think that that's very reasonable. We don't need to be super selective and scrutinize people incredibly closely if they're adults. And some adults will regret transitioning as an adult, but we all make mistakes or change our minds. So
totally. Yeah. When an adult makes that sort of mistake, it's sort of well, you were grown up. You could have seen this coming. I don't know. On some level, it feels like there's some level of responsibility that grown-ups have when they make decisions like that, right? And it's not sort of job of the state to prevent grown-ups from making mistakes so much.
Yeah, for sure. Although I will say that there are people who seem to say that the consent process was lackluster for them and that they didn't fully understand the risks or possible complications.
Totally. Yeah. Or any sort of medical thing that doctor needs to thoroughly go over the risks of what could go wrong. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Bottom surgery is incredibly invasive, particularly for trans women. And that doesn't mean no one should get it. But some people experience lifelong incontinence, right? Some people can never have an orgasm again. So. Yeah. If you don't know that there's a possibility that those things will happen to you, right? That's going to be devastating if that's what your outcome is.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel that's just my understanding is that sort of the standard for all surgical procedures is that the doctor needs to go over in almost excruciating detail everything that could possibly go wrong, and you have to sign your name next to every little bit that you're consenting to.
Yeah, exactly. And earlier when you were saying that puberty is distressing, right? And maybe we're pathologizing something that's very common. There was what's her name? I think the founding psychologist of the first pediatric gender clinic in the United States. Her name is Laura Edwards Leeper. And she has really noticed that there's been a huge demographic shift in who is coming to gender clinics. And that previously, it would have been people that had like lifelong dysphoria, memories of dysphoria from like 2, 3, 4 years old.
Right.
The parents noticed it, like it's very persistent. And now she's noticed that most of her patients have no history of childhood gender dysphoria.
Right.
And also it's what I've heard is that it's way more biological women or cisgender women, or however you want to say it.
Yeah. I came across the same thing. I think for those Dutch studies that everyone talks about, I think was almost all people with penises who didn't want them anymore. Broadly speaking, and who sort of hadn't wanted them since a very early age, and sort of had always known that about themselves, and that has changed lately.
Yeah, totally. And let's talk about the Dutch study next.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, like there's this very controversial phenomenon called rapid onset gender dysphoria. And so it's the idea that that there's sort of possibly like a social contagion element to teenagers, like becoming dysphoric or experiencing gender dysphoria. And they have not experienced it like earlier in their childhood. It comes in at puberty, basically. The Dr. Edwards Leeper has also noticed that type of patient frequently comes in with mental health issues that are unrelated to gender. And yeah, I don't know, it's this really interesting thing, that the idea of ROGD, because basically like a lot of trans activists find that to be sort of, first of all, they'll say it's unscientific, and they also basically find that it maybe like undermines the idea that those people are trans, right? Maybe it's saying like, well, first of all, it's saying that you can like decide to be trans because you think it's cool or because your friends are doing it, which is not like how trans activists generally want us to understand gender dysphoria.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like it gets back to that idea of like, is it a choice or not?
Exactly.
Anything
yeah.
that pushes you into thinking it might be a choice might be undermining. I don't know, people's civil rights, which you don't want, but you also have to tell the truth about what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that was super interesting in the article was it was basically saying that like advocacy groups like suggest that news media like never use the term rapid onset gender dysphoria. So it's basically, there are a lot of efforts to basically suppress that idea and call it invalid and unscientific. But what's interesting, and I don't actually really have a stance on that. I don't know. I don't know enough to like really know, but it seems reasonable that like there's this new population of people going to the clinics, and they might have a different sort of path for having gotten there. And one thing that really stood out to me was basically, I don't know if I can find it, but it's really common. Oh, here we go. In a recent study about 78 detransitioners that were surveyed, 40 of them said they had suffered from rapid onset gender dysphoria. So that's like a good half of people who transitioned and subsequently regretted it and detransitioned. They consider that to be a real phenomenon that impacted them, right? So that like is really, I found that very fascinating.
Totally. Well, and it makes me think that like if you're trying to again like give the healthcare to the right children, and you also worry about giving the healthcare to the wrong children, whether or not it's a rapid onset case seems like it could be a valuable indicator. Right, like
yeah, for sure.
If you just are trying to do good medicine, where you're not giving unnecessary treatments, and also you're giving as many necessary treatments as possible, maybe that's part of it, right? Like ask the parents, like when this kid was younger, a few years ago, when did these feelings start showing up, right? And if they started showing up, recently, that doesn't mean like, okay, well, no treatment ever, you're making it up. It just means like maybe we take a different path of treatment, right? Maybe we do things in a different order. Maybe we keep like the medicine and the surgery for further down the line.
Yeah, exactly.
See what happens. There's another part of it that feels, I don't know, that worries me a bit, is the idea of putting so much importance on like the physical body and having it be just how it needs to be to make you comfortable.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like that's another thing. Like being a teenager, everyone's uncomfortable, and like I think a lot of people have something about their body that makes them uncomfortable, and I just worry about any sort of like implicit offer to someone that's like, oh, you're uncomfortable with your body, these are the steps we can do, and then you'll feel good.
Yeah,
And that does, I mean,
exactly.
that's obviously how it goes for some people, but I feel like it's not, I don't, it makes me think of like eating disorders, right? The idea of like, well, you feel you feel like you weigh too much. The solution is you need to weigh less. And it's like,
Yeah,
whoa. Obviously no one says that about eating disorders, and they're different in a million ways. I'm not trying to
for
say they're the
sure.
same, but there is, I don't know, something strange in there, like
Well, I think just deciding, like telling children and their parents that there is one solution to gender
right.
dysphoria, right? That there aren't options. Like
Yeah,
that, I
totally.
think, is like a huge part of the concern, right?
Yeah, well,
Um,
it feels a little contradictory to me too, where it's like my impression is part of the idea is that your body doesn't need to align with your
right.
gender identity. So the idea that like the most important treatment avenue is to get those two things in alignment feels, I don't know, like it doesn't really, it doesn't quite track for me. I'm sure there are explanations, but in my head it feels a bit like wait, yeah, can't we just say like cool, yeah, you can be whatever gender you want, and that's, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, that doesn't mean you have to make any quick decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, first of all, I'd say like part of the explanation for that is that there really are different camps between the people
Mhm.
who are, you could call them like gender abolitionists, right? They're often non-binary or
Oh,
gender
okay, right.
fluid. And yeah, it's like, you don't need blank to be a man.
Mhm.
And then you've got like the derogatory term is transmedicalist, or even true scum would be the Tumblr verbiage. And that's
Uh-huh.
for people who say, like, you have to have gender dysphoria to be trans, like, period. That's the defining characteristic. This is like a medical
Okay,
issue, or even mental illness.
right.
And yeah, that's not the
Hmm.
same thing as just like wanting to wear a dress, you know?
Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you're getting at, that like yeah, okay, that tracks. And well, I follow, but it doesn't seem to align with my understanding. uh,
Yeah, well, and this is something that I think needs some improvement, is like, so we have a lot of advocates for like gender affirming care for children and youth,
yep.
who are trans, and most of them transition as adults, because it's very recent, right? That we're
Right, yeah.
even able to transition younger people. So a lot of those people feel very strongly that they would have like been happier, their life would have been better and easier if they had been
Mm,
able to transition as a youth. And
right.
they I don't doubt that, actually. I think that in the case of people who are like really happy with transitioning and their outcomes, like it is likely that if they started
Mm,
earlier, they would have still, been happy with the outcome. But the thing is, there's a couple things. One is that those people are speculating because they didn't transition as children, right?
sure.
So they're pretty sure, that it would have been good for them. But again, like, I don't know, puberty blockers can, lower your bone density.
Mm,
If they're given at too early in puberty, they can make it so you can't orgasm ever.
right.
There's, or even like for a vaginoplasty, you need to basically have enough flesh to use to create the
Right.
neovagina. And so again, if you get blockers too early, you could actually have surgical complications later. So I just want to take what the trans people who transition as adults, like to take their opinion with a grain of salt. I still think it's super important and it needs to be one of the groups that we listen to, but it's not the only one. There are lots of adults walking around who at some point experience distress around puberty, around their bodies, and they didn't transition and they're glad. And that's a group that like could also be a model for young people when they're like trying to imagine what their future looks like, right? And that's a piece that I just feel like gets missed, right? Because there, again, a number of people who desist or who detransition basically were scared to be gay, and they thought that like if they transition, then they could be in a heterosexual relationship, and that would just be like so much easier to go through the world with, right? So I feel like I'm worried about like the narrowing of options for young people, right? I don't see like medical transition as like an inherently bad thing, but I do think that children having to decide to like can they decide on like permanent irreversible decisions. That's really up in the air for me. And I guess the last thing I'd want to say about that is that like children can have a hard time like advocating for themselves and going against an authority figure, right? Like if you are surrounded by like everyone who believes in the gender affirming model of care, and you know your parents are like, yeah, like this is a good idea, your doctor's like, yeah, this is a good idea, your therapist, your nurse, like everyone who you're talking to about your gender dysphoria is believes that this is the right choice and earnestly believes it. They're not trying to trick you or hurt you or anything, but that's just what they believe to be the best case for you. Like, does a young person like have the ability in that moment to be like, I actually think I'm changing my mind, or I'm not so sure yet, or I'm kind of scared of like surgery. Maybe I don't want to do that, right? And there actually was a detransitioner in this story who basically said like before she got top surgery, she was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so young, like I can't believe I'm about to do this. And she still did it, right? Like, did anyone ask her, are you sure? Like, do you still want to do this? It's okay if you don't. Have you changed your mind? Like, this is optional, right?
Well, I wonder though how many, if some of those questions would be like people would have problems with you asking, are you sure, too many times, or like should the doctor I don't know, because I think you're right. It reminds me of that when you go to a restaurant and the person comes up, the waiter comes up and very quickly is like, so food's all good, and it's like they don't want to, they're not really asking, right? They're just saying like, say yes, and then I did my duty, as opposed to like occasionally you get the server who's like, all right, we're looking for feedback, anything you think about the food, right? It's like the doctor could ask, are you sure, in either way, right? And they're like, you're sure about this, right? And it's like, of course I'm sure.
You sure you want to do the right thing, right? You sure you want to do the thing that's going to make your life better, right? Like,
but I feel like people might have issue with a doctor who goes too far the other way and is like really, really like pausing and like almost, I don't know, like really making room for that negative response. Might feel like trying to evoke the negative response, right?
Well, you're 100% on point about that, because there are people who believe that anything outside of gender affirming care is basically transphobic, and also conversion therapy. Conversion therapy gets invoked when a therapist is not immediately affirming. And this is another thing where I'm like, I first was like, maybe this is a right-wing conspiracy theory that like, if you're like, you know what, I think, you're going through a lot, you have an eating disorder, you have OCD, I think maybe we should like, take some time to deal with those and also gender dysphoria, and let's check in 6 months about like whether you're still feeling like you want to transition. Like that approach gets denounced as conversion
Wow.
therapy.
Huh.
And this article showed me that it's not a right-wing conspiracy theory, that there are like multiple therapists that are profiled in the article that basically were investigated or like were at risk of losing their licenses because they basically take like an exploratory approach, or it's also called watchful waiting sometimes, where you're like, all right, let's just slow down a bit. Let's, take time to, again, assess neurodivergence, assess mental illness and trauma, and just like let it become clear whether this is whether gender dysphoria is like the correct diagnosis for the distress, or whether there's a different one, right?
Or even just like, is this the right treatment? Right? Like if someone's really stressed out about all these things and also is having like gender dysphoria, is the right first line of treatment puberty blockers, or might the best first line of treatment be something else? Like it's there's lots of ways to help people, particularly people who have a lot of troubles. And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and the Dutch study, let's talk about the Dutch study. So this article was fascinating because somewhere in there it said like that it's basically taken as like gospel in the US and Canada. And in my limited experience, that is true. It's basically like the Dutch study tells us what we need to know. It's the science is settled. This is it's basically the study that's often used to be like, here is why the gender affirming model is the way to go, right? But as it turns out, like the Dutch study has been widely criticized, and there are like some particular things that feel really important to point out about it. One of them was that the Dutch study excluded people who had serious psychological conditions.
Right.
So these young people that are showing up at these gender clinics who have an eating disorder, OCD, anxiety, depression, autism, ADHD, whatever, those people would not have been eligible for the Dutch study.
Right. Which it's like, I get when you're doing a study, you might do that because you're looking for, it's like an early stage study that you want to have like nice clean data for. So you're like, let's make sure we're only studying this one symptom.
Totally.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But that means you can only apply the results to a similar population.
Exactly. Exactly. And, there was no long-term follow-up with the study's participants. A number of people dropped out. Like, I guess some people think there are methodological flaws and weaknesses with the study. And it is a study that is presented as like definitive. And yeah, it makes it like, again, we're talking about unintended consequences, right? Like, obviously children with gender dysphoria were underserved by the old model. I think that that's like pretty uncontroversial to say.
Or not served at all, you could even say.
Or not served at all. Yeah, for sure. But I think like what's just so distressing, I guess, like being a leftist who has the concerns that I do, is just that it is like literally considered transphobic by a lot of people to like say what I've said today. And that like honestly really breaks my heart, because like I have tons, this is going to sound like my one black friend thing, but like this is my community, right? Like these are like people that I've dated, these are friends, these are people that I care about so much. I mean, I guess I'll throw a little fun surprise in here, but like I was on testosterone briefly. I bound my chest for a while. Like I considered top surgery and decided against it. So it's like, I don't know, like I don't feel like a total outsider to this. And I also like I support the people who will be helped by these treatments to get them.
Yeah.
And I'm against like blanket bans. Of course I am, because
totally.
like those are extremely harmful, right? But it has just become such a heated culture war issue that, yeah, I just honestly, I feel nervous about putting this out. We'll do it, but you know, it's that divisive basically to even say that we lack evidence, you know, that we need
Right.
more research.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think we do. And I think that like if the left starts like talking to and caring about detransitioners, like a lot of them, that's what they're advocating for. They want better research, because if you think about it, like they are like they're affected by trans care, right? Some of them, if they've like had hysterectomies, they continue to need endocrinological care.
Smart word.
Yeah,
totally.
like the ones I know, the detransitioners I know, again, they have lovers who are trans and friends who are trans, and like there's no like they don't have like any political agenda to try and undermine trans care. They actually just want it to be better.
Totally. And who wouldn't want that?
Right. That's what that's what can get so confusing about all this, is it's like the thing I want more than anything else is like much more robust, long-term, comprehensive research so that we can get it right more often.
Right. So that we truly know the best way to help people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
maybe that's where we end it this week, eh?
I think so. I think that might be a good spot. Yeah. So I got a lot off my chest today. Yeah. I'm really glad we did this.
Yeah, I guess we see what people say.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely let us know your take, listeners.
Yes, please.
Well, this has been Hot Take Think Tank. Until next time.